In recent years, I've preached 4 sermons on Israel and Palestine, and we've welcomed both an Israeli peace activist and a Palestinian peace activist to share their perspectives from this pulpit. In June of 2023, I led a 10-day pilgrimage during which we spent half our time in Israel and half our time in Palestine, accompanied throughout by both an Israeli and a Palestinian tour guide who were in dialogue with one another. You can find links to all of that, including recommended books and films and podcasts and more at frederickuu.org/pilgrimage. As we now mark 2 years since October 7th, I join those celebrating the current ceasefire, the return of the Israeli hostages, and the release of the Palestinian detainees. While President Trump and his team deserve recognition for helping broker this ceasefire, they have been rightly criticized for spiking the ball on the 50-yard line. The administration's current plan sidesteps critical issues, not only the ongoing Israeli occupation of Gaza, but also the daily hardships and restrictions faced by Palestinians in the West Bank. Until the root causes of this conflict are faced with courage and with honesty, a just and lasting peace will remain out of reach. Both Israelis and Palestinians yearn for what every human being deserves: dignity, safety, and a place to call home. If you're curious to go deeper, I often read one or more books. I always read one or more books as background research for my sermons. But in the last 2 years, I've read more than 20 books on Israel and Palestine. So many words have been written by scholars, by journalists, by people on every side of this entrenched and heartbreaking divide. And I'll be referencing various books throughout this sermon, but if I had to limit myself to only 3, I don't anticipate that you're all going to go home and read 20 books. These would be my starting points. They were all published this year. The first is Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, A Reckoning. It's by Peter Beinart, a Jewish-American professor of journalism and political science at the City University of New York. His book is a powerful work of self-examination and meditation on Jewish ethics in the wake of Gaza's destruction. He also has a really powerful podcast that he regularly puts new episodes on. Second, Perfect Victims and the Politics of Appeal by Mohammed El-Kurd. He's a Palestinian poet, essayist, and a correspondent for the Palestine correspondent for The Nation magazine. El-Kurd interrogates this expectations that unless Palestinians are the, quote, perfect victims, they will never be seen as fully human and deserving of basic rights. He exposes this double standard that shapes global narratives and insists on the vital importance of allowing Palestinians to speak for themselves in their own voice instead of merely being spoken about. Third, Tomorrow is Yesterday: Life, Death, and the Pursuit of Peace in Israel-Palestine. This is by Hussein Agha and Robert Malley, who are both veteran Middle East peace negotiators. Agha is a Palestinian scholar, and Malley a U.S. diplomat who served senior Middle East roles under Presidents Clinton, Obama, and Biden. This insider account reflects on why is it that the peace process has failed so often every time in the past, and what a more honest way forward would require. From my own perspective, as I've reflected on what do I feel most deeply called to say this morning, these words come closest to the truth of my heart in this moment. I don't assume it necessarily speaks for where you are. I just want to share with you where I am. I am neither Zionist nor anti-Zionist. And I feel like we're often called, we have to pick a side in this, and I feel called to not pick a side. I am pro-peace and pro-coexistence, pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli, pro-dignity, pro-self-determination, and pro-human rights. I'm going to say more about all of that. There's so much division in this ongoing cycle of violence, but as a saying from peace activist circles remind us, it is okay to be heartbroken for more than one group of people at the same time. Holding compassion for every human being in both Israel and Palestine, it actually doesn't dilute our convictions. It forces us to widen and deepen where we're coming from. It's an act of moral imagination to recognize that the liberation and safety of everyone on all sides is bound up in the liberation and safety of whoever's on the other side. That insight echoes the deep wisdom of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who reminded us that our lives are woven together in a single garment of destiny. He said, "I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be." This is the interrelated structure of reality. Israelis will never be what they ought to be until Palestinians are what they ought to be, and Palestinians will never be what they ought to be until Israelis are what they ought to be. It's just all woven together. Here at UCF, we are a big tent community, and I'm acutely aware that among our members and friends are people who locate themselves at many different points along the spectrum of views on Israel and Palestine. I speak today only for myself and from my evolving understandings of this complex and deeply entrenched conflict. What I share today comes not from certainty, but from ongoing reflection and a shared commitment to finding our way forward to peace and justice for all. I'll begin by saying just a little bit more about what do I mean when I say that I am neither Zionist nor anti-Zionist, but rather pro-peace and coexistence, pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli, pro-dignity, pro-self-determination, and pro-human rights. One specific sense in which I have just never identified as a Zionist is I do not believe that the only way to ensure Jewish safety in the world is through the state of Israel. I'm committed to co-creating a future in which Jewish people, in which all people, are safe everywhere in the world. One of the most powerful explorations I've found of this perspective is the book Safety Through Solidarity, a radical guide to fighting anti-Semitism. It is by Shane Burley and Ben Lorber, two Jewish activists whose work links the fight against anti-Semitism with the broader struggles for collective liberation for everyone. I agree with them that we must not allow anti-Semitism to be seen either as an eternal hatred or as some natural phenomenon that is just always out there in the world. Anti-Semitism, it is a social construction that arose from political forces, and it must be deconstructed through a better politics and a deeper solidarity. Burley and Lorber emphasize that we cannot truly end anti-Semitism by building higher walls, by fortifying nation states, or by conflating legitimate criticism of extremist Israeli policies with anti-Semitism itself. Cynically weaponizing the definition of anti-Semitism, as the Trump administration is currently doing, it undermines free speech, it chills academic freedom, and it discourages advocacy for Palestinian rights. In the words of the authors, we must fight anti-Semitism at its root by building powerful mass movements to transform society's underlying inequality, exploitation, and alienation. We must fight for a more just and more connected world where people no longer need to turn to conspiracy theories, scapegoating, and demonization to make sense of the fundamental brokenness that they feel all around them. Support for this vision is not only growing today, but also draws on a long history of non-Zionist thought within the Jewish tradition itself. I don't have time to go through that history with you this morning, as very interesting and important as it is. But if you want to know more, a good overview is found in Our Palestine Question, Israel and American Jewish Descent, 1948 to 1978 by Jeffrey Levin, who is a Jewish American professor of Middle Eastern and Jewish Studies at Emory University. Another reason I'm not a Zionist is that ultimately I am a post-nationalist. Nationalism is one of those ideas that deeply shapes our world today, but it is not the only way we humans have organized ourselves, governed ourselves, nor is it the only way we might imagine living together in the future. I hope we can imagine a better way. I know that we can. I believe it's Star Trek, no. If we had all afternoon, I would actually say, so we need to start with the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. I know that sounds nerdy, and I promise not to inflict that on you today, but that treaty was actually, it's less than 400 years ago, and it was a deep turning point in how we come to, what we think of today as normal and inevitable is actually less than 400 years old and developed and evolved over time. It was different before that, and it might be very different in the future. It certainly is in the broad sweep of history. So instead of going through that history with you, maybe we'll do that another time, let me instead quote St. John. I mean St. John Lennon, of course. And I want you to really listen and reflect on these very familiar lyrics. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. And you may say, I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I hope someday you'll join us, and the whole world will be as one. And I share those lyrics at the risk of maybe even sounding a little cheesy, but I couldn't be more sincere. In the words of our old UU6 principle, Lennon is inviting us to imagine a way toward the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And so much of what is going on right now with Ukraine, with Israel and Palestine, with the Trump administration is a dissolving of the international world order and all of the laws that got written in the wake of World War II. Again, we don't have time for that history, but it's terribly important. The founding of the UN, the Declaration of Human Rights, all the stuff that happened in the mid-40s that is really at risk right now. So when people ask me occasionally, do you think Israel has the right to exist? The way I really want to respond is, do you think the United States has the right to exist? Or any country? What might it mean to move beyond whether a nation has the right to exist and instead ask, how might we earthlings live together on this planet with dignity, with safety, and belonging for all? And don't get me wrong, there's a lot that I love about this country, just as there's so much that many Israelis love about Israel and Palestinians about Palestine, and I do not think our species is ready yet for global governance, so don't email me about that. But my deepest commitment is not to whether any particular country has the right to exist, but to the conviction that every human being has the right to exist. This earth has the right to exist and to flourish. All that being said, why then am I neither Zionist nor anti-Zionist? At least in my current view, one significant factor perpetuating this cycle of violence is extremists on both sides that just continuing to hope and act in vain as if the other side is somehow just going to go away and vanish. There is just no simple way in which Israel would cease to exist. Among other things, Israel has a major nuclear arsenal. And this conflict cannot be reduced to a simple story of colonizer and colonized. The Jewish people have a deep indigenous and ancestral connection to the land, and they have no mother country to which they can return. Likewise, Palestinians have an enduring indigenous and ancestral connection to the same land. When I speak of getting to root causes, part of what I mean is that there is, of course, nothing inherent about Israelis that makes them violent towards Palestinians. And there's nothing inherent about Palestinians that makes them violent toward Israelis. We are human beings. We are deeply shaped by the social conditions in which we find ourselves. And to me, it's important to recognize that if I had grown up in Gaza, or if I'd grown up in Israel, my politics, my way of seeing things, my way of seeing the various sides might be very, very different. Of course, each person bears individual responsibility, but our social context can make acting ethically significantly easier or drastically more difficult. As one example of this dynamic, Aga and Mali offer a striking account of the deep-seated divisions that have so often doomed past peace negotiations. Israelis want genuine acceptance and normalcy. They want eternal security, which is hard to distinguish from eternal dominance of Palestine. Just take a second to take in that difficult truth. Wanting safety and security is so profoundly human. It is what everyone deserves. But it cannot come at the cost of a never-ending occupation. Palestinians want justice and redemption, dignity and self-determination. It's what everyone wants. They also want to return to a life that is no longer there. Again, I think we just have to breathe in that hard truth. The co-authors continue, we use the title Tomorrow is Yesterday because Israelis return to a time of triumphalism when they conquer and crush, but cannot prevail because Palestinians will not surrender. Palestinians return to a time of survival where they endure and persist, but face loss, chaos, and wandering. But as Dr. King asked us in the title to his final book, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? The choice is ours together. The most promising way forward I've encountered is proposed by a group called A Land for All. It's jointly led by both Palestinians and Israelis. Their motto is 2 states, 1 homeland. You can look them up in your favorite search engine to explore the details. Here are the basics. Palestine and Israel will recognize one another, and their territories will be based on the 1967 borders. But there will be no hard border. And borders are messed up anyway. I mean, made up anyway, right? They are also messed up. But I remember one of my Latina feminist Christian history professor, I went to seminary in Texas, used to say, like, borders are a wound. Anytime you see a border on a map, it's just like seeing a scar, a wound. The 2 states would be a confederation with a single homeland, allowing citizens from one state to live as permanent residents of the other. There would be freedom of movement for everyone, and Jerusalem would serve as the capital for both states. But each national group would only vote in elections for its own state. Israel and Palestine would be jointly responsible for security and economic matters that affect both populations. Among the many virtues of this proposal is that all of those illegal Israeli settlers in the West Bank would become, citizens of Palestine, but still able to vote in Israel. Unlike the 2-state model that the international community has backed for decades, it rejects complete separation as a condition for peace based on the high likelihood that under this 2-state model, the 2-state model is not going to happen. Everyone that keeps talking about it is lying to themselves and lying to you. That ship has sailed. If you look at a map of the West Bank today, it's too many settlements have happened. It's not possible. So this new, and the 2-state model would also arguably leave these 2 nations deeply hostile to one another. So much of the problem here is the separation, is not hearing one another's stories. So this also calls for Israelis or Palestinians, it calls for neither Israelis nor Palestinians to extinguish their dream of national separation, self-determination in any part of the land, making all of the territory from the river to the sea a land for all, a land for both Israelis and Palestinians. For more hopeful ways along these lines, including examples of these many other, like in Ireland after the Troubles, these many other conflicts that have gone on a really long time that people just could not imagine ever ending. And some examples of that and how they might apply here, I do recommend this book, The Holy and the Broken, A Cry for Israeli and Palestinian Peace from a Land That Must Be Shared. It's by Itai Flesher, the educational director of Kids for Peace Jerusalem, a program that brings together Jewish, Christian, and Muslim youth for interfaith dialogue grounded in their shared humanity and the work of peacemaking across difference. Ultimately, Palestinians and Israelis must themselves determine the best way forward, but the groups I pay most attention to are those that are co-led by both Israelis and Palestinians. So A Land for All, the Parent Circle, Combatants for Peace, Standing Together, and others. The future, however, is not only in the hands of those most directly impacted. It is also vital for those of us who live here in the United States to be honest about the ways that our taxpayer dollars have been and continue to perpetuate this conflict. As Senator Bernie Sanders, who is Jewish, recently said, Hamas, a terrorist organization, began this war with a brutal attack on October 7th. 2023, which killed 1,200 innocent people and took 250 hostages. Israel, as any country, has the right to defend itself. But over the last 2 years, Senator Sanders continues, Israel has not simply defended itself against Hamas. It has waged an all-out war against the entire Palestinian people. Many legal experts have now concluded that Israel has committed acts of genocide. Senator Sanders continues, but whether you call it a genocide or ethnic cleansing or mass atrocities or war crimes, regardless, the path forward is clear. The United States must not continue sending many billions of dollars of weapons to Netanyahu's extremist government. We must use every ounce of our leverage to maintain the ceasefire, to deliver a massive surge of humanitarian aid facilitated by the United Nations, and take initial steps to provide Palestinians with a state of their own. I hold in my heart that October 7th was the deadliest days for the single deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust, stirring deep collective grief, reawakening generational trauma. Hamas bears immense responsibility for its willingness to endanger its own citizens and for pursuing a strategy of violence that has brought devastation to both Israelis and Palestinians alike. I also hold in my heart that since October 7th, Israeli military operations in Gaza have killed more than 67,000 Palestinians, the vast majority of whom have been identified as civilians. More than 20,000 of those killed were children under the age of 18. In total, more than 10% of Gaza's pre-war population has been killed or seriously injured in the past 2 years. Nearly the entire population of Gaza, more than 2 million people, has faced acute food insecurity, ranging from emergency levels of hunger to famine. For Palestinians, these years of devastation, deprivation, and displacement have reawakened their generational trauma of the 1948 Nakba, in which roughly 700,000 Palestinians were violently expelled or fled from their homes. Let me be clear. In the face of Holocaust denial and a truly disturbing rise in anti-Semitism, both here in the US and around the world, I am by no means suggesting we need less Holocaust education. In many ways, we need more. But in Israel and around the world, we desperately need far more education about the historic and ongoing Nakba experienced by Palestinians. Never again must mean never again for anyone. In that spirit, we began this Sunday service by singing the classic UU hymn, Soon the Day Will Arise. Wait and see, what a world it can be if we share, if we care, you and me. I do believe in that better world that can and must be, and I am grateful to be with all of you on that journey. Our hymn of response, if you'll begin to turn, stay seated for now, but begin to turn to our hymn of response, 1037 in your teal hymnal, We Begin Again in Love. This hymn reminds us that the work of truth, forgiveness, and reconciliation, it is difficult yet vital, essential, and full of possibility. And as we sing, I just want you to notice if any of these lyrics bring up something for you in your own life. The call to begin again in love, it is not only for Israelis and Palestinians, it's for all of us. In every one of our relationships, every community that we are part of, every corner of our shared world.